I wish that I could be more magnanimous about this video. The truth is that when I make these videos, very frequently, my goal is to advise and protect my peers. And although some potential redemption could exist to that effect by making this video, I want it noted that the existence of this video, my having to make it, are evidence of a crime being committed against my person. As I said, I wish I could be more magnanimous about it. But above and beyond the issues that I raise in this talk, it should be noted that I have absolutely no desire to go into these topics with anybody at this time, at this day, at this hour. And just as I failed to save Shannon Harp's life when I tried to, I'm afraid of these people who are demanding this video and their ability to murder innocent people in broad daylight and cold blood with the blessings of the powers that be, as amazing as that is. And although there's hope that there could be some side effect to the contrary outcome, you would think I'd have the sense to keep quiet. They're demanding that I make this video. And it may be that that means they're planning another horrible act. And I think I should point out that this borders on facilitating them discussing what's happening. But be that as it may, my objective, and I think you'll agree by the time I'm finished, is clearly to stop them. And there have been occasions when I was able to stop them by complying with them. They call themselves the authorities. Now, whenever Michael Reagan wants his favorite scene some more, he begins accusing me of violating national security, by which he means he has the right to invade my privacy by any means necessary, including the ultra high method of nuclear magnetic resonance interrogation. And Peter Gabriel, his ally, said, "Wear your inside out." That wasn't, you have the right to remain silent. And they implanted a neuroplasm that they could squeeze into seizures to make talk distortions that they had implanted while living with Boris Karloff at the Dakota. Boris Karloff was Frankenstein. But these Liberty telephone directories from 1973 will exhibit the name Dr. Frankenstein on Bunker Hill. This was a sophisticated outfit going after the brain of America. My father was in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I remember JFK, and my father was a naval veteran and a Peace Corps leader. So they will say that this is the opposite of the truth, that they're after a deaf person who they attacked blindside as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old maybe, as a traitor. How that works, I don't know exactly. But it has a lot to do with this article in the Smithsonian called The History Thief. The poachers who worked with John Schulman, chasing me out of Pittsburgh to Seattle, where they lied for him and worked his gangster objectives here in Seattle as well as they did in Pittsburgh. Now, what we're dealing with is dereliction of common sense, masquerading under the name of principle. I, for example, reported to the Postal authorities that John Schulman was, I suspected, ripping them off. And they sent somebody from the union to tell me not to start rumors about distinguished people. Here it turns out he was involved in an $8 million museum heist. So certain questions exist about what's going on with this crowd. One of the things that we see in the framework of the authorities' representation of their justifications is a long-standing paradox of pluralism in the United States. One of the things that we know about the paradox of pluralism is that it defends freedom of religion. And some freedoms of religion um, become so divorced from the objectives of American Congress and American Commonwealth that they become sects in and of themselves. And a writer from Goshen College, to whom I have a social debt, who assisted me in my education, describes a sect as being something that is basically at war with the American reasoned by the founding fathers. So um, a sect is a religious organization that is at war with the existing mores. It's what a man named Redekop writes. So one of the things we see in this is that the study of social anthropology pertaining to religious groups in America has leads to questions about um, the role that persecuted minorities play in a pluralistic society as subgroups. And the search for insight about this has to do with understanding the difference that they by which they see common sense. You see, if they see common sense very differently from the way we see common sense, then the majority of people see common sense, then their common sense as a sect is what is at war with our mores. The pluralism is one of the alleged characteristics of which the America is most proud, but which is more or less a fantasy. For America is now properly described as a nation of conformity, homogeneity, and intolerance. And I don't know very much about him. He resembles Jay Inslee, doesn't he? But the idea that America tolerance is a fantasy surely underscores the common sense of this violent sect that is at war with our mores. Clearly, something is remiss when common sense says that the postal union should be allowed to murder 3 more Kennedys, rape a deaf girl, torture a deaf man, threaten to kill more innocent people, rip or murder a bystander. I mean, no psycho sociopath Rambo from a Unabomber would have ever convinced me that such a mentality could be adopted by people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, the so-called powers that be. But here we are with what they've done. And their common sense idea has to do with protecting privacy. Well, as a reporter, I know that there are times when you are tactful, you are tasteful, but it's foolish to be baited into being scared to report a crime like the murder of a child, which Seattle, Washington blackmailed me into saying that I wouldn't report in their illustration by the Ripper murder of Shannon Harps. Ben Shannon used to tell me that his father was always one step ahead of the FBI. I don't know that all of these signifiers fit together, but some of them do. And common sense is that you advise your peers that a terrible crusade has taken place from a sect at war with the idea that America should be a place of tolerance. And they're claiming that national security is at work in enforcing the omerta of a godfather, that you do not report crime. If you report crime, it will backfire on you. And the government itself, the law enforcement itself, and the people who are doing it. Now, the Mennonites were chased out of Russia when they stopped having a military deferral for their religion. And of course, there's a certain conscientious objection to using the military for organized crime involved in standing up to these weasels who claim that their alliance with Putin gave them the right to cheer on the terrible betrayal of Russian troops in the Normandies against the people of the Ukraine. Now, I realize there were mysterious facets to what happened in the Ukraine, and I was one of the people who was opening the books on them, but I was also positioned to open the books on those things by a war college that deems itself a war college, even though its constitution is that it's a civil public school. So the secret sect business I call the Shifties. Now, if you look at um, the Kennedy assassination, when a lot of this began, you see the invisible hand reaping. And it was always clear, just follow the evidence to Michael Payne. Of course, they say don't violate Michael Payne's privacy. Well, if you follow the evidence to Michael Payne, you realize that he had possession of the gun. And the person who spoke for the Warren Commission, General Walker, had just been left out of an insane asylum for threatening to kill JFK. And he was associated with Oswald, who was a signifier of Oswald Mosley, books about whom General Walker appears on the back as most racist man in America, and so on. So all you have to do is follow the chain of evidence, and you get the people who murdered JFK. But you're not supposed to do that because it violates the national security, the privacy rights of the killers. So, you're talking about a woman, for example, who baited me into um, questioning her conduct in my family's property as a cover up for an reported infanticide that came as blackmail from the Stranger newspaper to justify the reprimand of Shannon Harp. This is crime after crime after crime after crime. And they're saying that it's justified because of a principle that is at odds with the idea of tolerance in the United States. It's a sacred common sense of a sect that has declared uh, a war against information about their involvement in genocide. They say they represent the victims of AIDS while helping the people who committed the act. Like, look at Ringo Starr, for example. My explanation for what happened is clearly based on reasonable evidence. All you have to do, it's legal to look at the evidence. Okay, all you have to do is look at the evidence, and you can see the Michael Reagan justification for invading my privacy, saying that I was harboring a shadow of doubt that his father was wholly innocent, was actually discovery that I was lying to myself about his father, that his father was guilty. You can look at the evidence. So if you look at the evidence, you see that he was working with Lenin and Boris Karloff on this insane wad maker Van de Graaff generator Frankenstein crime, to convict the United States of Hiroshima. They murdered JFK and avenged the Axis and put Ono in charge of the unions. So you have this situation where Ono's easy, puppet master to control the victims because she was one of the people who unleashed the sexual liberation movement for Japanese pornography who represent themselves in the script. And then they cover it all up with the story, which is just a story. It's Lysander's book, The Invention of Life, helps explain what they pulled. It's an invisible story, a Houdini. Like they have perfected their game to the point where they told a lie in reality, and everybody believed it. It's like if you pick up, as Henry Bergson says, somebody you believe tells you that a basket cut with a blanket over it has iron scrap in it. You pick it up real fast and it's empty. You'll lose your balance at first because you believe the person. And this is the signifier from late 19th, early 20th century of cinema and the ideas behind cinema that they capitalized on in a long-ranging plan from World War One. Not in, didn't want to be around to be held responsible for the insane, crippling trafficking that he unleashed. So he masqueraded in a Houdini as a spirit of the victims, and they sided with the people who then eliminated our grannies with COVID-19. And we're supposed to just ignore that that's what they really did. So you're violating the privacy of these people by exposing them for genocide. It's like, if they were throwing Jews in ovens, the horrible thing that the Germans did. You'd be violating their privacy for reporting it. And the powers that be believe this. The powers that be, the Postal Union, the governor's office, Congress, the President Biden, all believe this. And they all live by that. They murdered 3 Kennedys and they didn't say a word about what. So um, the idea is behind this is that life completely voids justice. Life is too complex. There is no such thing as justice. Pursuit of justice is a fantasy from the people who are religious. They bite their tongues and say, "Holy Father, I've sinned. I will be silent because it's too ridiculous to spend my life banging my head against the brick wall of this insane stupidity." And they say, "We'll just climate change everything and then start over with a clean slate." Solzhenitsyn used to say that moral responsibility was the most important key to civilization uh, before an objective legal system. Objective legal system is also absolutely important. So Bavakar Banda believed similar things to the extent that if you um, hold to what little you can accomplish, you're making progress. So, I've tried my level best to explain that Michael Reagan isn't entitled to his favorite scene, and the Army has not been violated by my efforts to report such people as John Schulman, the history thief in the museum. Now, John Schulman had a man working for him that spent a lot of time with a Trump speechwriter. I was surprised to discover that amount of stuff with Trump speechwriter, but I had reported him as well as Schulman because he was an Israeli who got on KDK radio masquerading as Abdul the terrorist, giving Palestinians a bad name when he was an Israeli extremist. That's that's not violating his privacy. I'm sorry to say, not violating anybody's privacy by reporting a crime. But why they were after me was that they see language as computational. Ming-Na Wen's faction used to say, "I demand his language," because they wanted everything that the Post Dispatch had to offer, everything that Iowa had to offer. They wanted a complete raid on the Bank of America. The claim that Yoko Ono was wrong. She wasn't wrong. She wronged me. She tortured me. And the fact that they've succeeded in getting yet another tape from me, in my opinion, is a crime.